So, good afternoon, Facebook land.
Hello.
We are going to come to you live on Facebook, and in a second, we're going to add Instagram too. We're popping our Instagram live
Yeah.
cherry together.
Multiple channels of information and aliveness going out into the universe and coming back at us.
So as you join us, we'd love it if you pop in the comments where you're tuning in from. And what about telling us like what inspired you to be on this video with us? Like, why are you interested in learning a little more about being trauma informed?
That would be great. Yes, please tell us what brings you here and what catches your curiosity and aliveness.
And as I play with the technology, I'll play with the technology instead of you for now. We're going to try and behave on this call. We've been having very, very juicy conversation as we got ready for all of you.
It was.
Yes. So tell me a little bit about your practice and what you do in the world, because I don't know if all my audience knows you yet, and I want them to.
Thank you. Yeah. So I'm a somatic sex and relationship coach and a trauma resolution practitioner. I've been in the healing arts world for about 20 years now. And what else to say? I am deep in love with my work. For me, a lot of it is supporting people in landing more in their bodies, feeling comfortable in their own skin, harvesting and unwinding the life force and creativity and empowerment that gets bound up in our old wounds and stories, and bringing that into a more embodied way of living, being intimate with ourselves, each other.
I love that, being intimate with ourselves. Yes.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. And what kind of modalities do you use to work with people?
So I'm a somatica practitioner. It's a particular form of sex and relationship coaching that I learned from my teachers, Celeste and Danielle. So it's got a particular kind of frame where we're working within a container, but I'm bringing my whole authentic, vulnerable, erotic self into relationship with my clients. And we're practicing intimacy in real time.
And you, excuse me, you were sharing with me about somatica before that it can involve some touch.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're sitting on the other side of the room necessarily.
Right. So we're not talking about sexuality as if it's something out there, but it's actually here, in real time.
Right.
So erotic touch is on the menu of options. Also, cuddling is on the menu of options.
Can be so good for the nervous system.
Totally. So I kind of describe my work as part clothes on bikini work, part reparenting, part trauma resolution.
Makes a lot of sense if you're working with attachment styles or attachment woundings from childhood. I mean, therapists often play a role in reparenting people who've had a challenging
So providing a certain quality of holding and spaciousness, presence, helping people down-regulate and feel a sense of safety. If you never got much of that or just got little tastes of it in your childhood, it's nice to have somebody attuned to you.
Yes.
And hold you and love you unconditionally wherever you happen to be at in the moment. So, and then that provides a model that we can integrate into our nervous systems, and so we can do it for ourselves. And then that's what happens ideally in childhood. We have parents, caregivers, culture that lovingly holds us in our awareness and supports us, and then we learn how to do those things for ourselves, and then so we carry around a sense of safety wherever we go, ideally.
Right. And we live in the real world where many of us don't have that experience or weren't given that as children. So working with trauma helps people recreate as adults safe spaces so they can be regulated in the world and make up for what they didn't get as children, right?
Yeah.
And I know I'm talking to the screen instead of to you most of the time, but
yeah, I'm not quite sure. So should I be
that
paying more attention over there?
Let's give our viewers lots of attention.
Sorry, I'm a little new to the Facebook Live world, so thank you for modeling for me.
That's okay. Well. I love popping people's cherries.
I'm seeing a question here.
Yes. Well, let's just finish the introductions and we'll go back to questions. So just for those of you, because I know some of Lorina's audience is on this Facebook Live as well. My name is Caroline Carrington. I am a certified Neo-Tantra educator. I run a Neo-Tantra school called Sarasa Tantra that really is focused on creating a solid foundation of safety and integrity for these very edgy practices that can happen when we're playing with erotic life force energy. And I also love working hands-on with the body because for me, just trying to figure things out. We were talking about this before we got on the video. We were getting warmed up for you guys, you see. But like you can't, one of my teachers, Krishna Das, says you can't think yourself out of the prison that you've created with your mind. So doing it through the body means you're incorporating the whole system. So I love working hands-on using pleasure as a tool for transformation, and again working with some co-regulation too. So we're starting to use a bit of jargon, but we will do our best to break it down for you. And I'm loving that people are asking questions, and we're going to just chat for a little while, and then we will come back to the questions as we can. So I was saying as well beforehand that I feel like we've been swimming in this pretty intense soup.
Yeah.
Since, the Me Too campaign, I hope I'm pronouncing her name right, Taranga Burke, I believe 10 years ago actually came up with that hashtag. But about a year ago, it really went viral.
Right.
And initially my first thought was, oh, wow, everybody has to get in to see a trauma therapist, and that's the only way to heal. And right, your reaction is spot on, because there are many ways. Well, that's just the way I like to do my own work, right?
And it's not accessible for everybody.
It isn't always accessible. And for some people, just being able, even people on this thread, like sharing their stories. For some people, that's enough to have their stories seen and believed. But other people may need practitioners or a therapist to actually walk them through and support them out of trauma that's been trapped either in the body or in
depending on
their
the
psyche.
level of intensity, level of resources and support systems they have in their lives.
Yeah. So the word trauma is kind of bandied about a lot, and probably the most layperson's definition that I've heard is that trauma is any experience that's above somebody's capacity to manage in their nervous system. If you can't handle something and it's become overwhelming, that can end up landing and imprinting as trauma in the body. But my understanding in the DSM, I think they're on DSM-5 now, is that it actually has a component about being worried, like frightened for your life.
Right, so, overwhelmed, terrified. Yeah, different people have different definitions of trauma. But there's almost like a way that the history, our past experiences, get trapped inside the nervous system. And so there's a certain part of our nervous systems that are replaying that experience until it finds a sense of completion and resolution. And but that sense of like the stressors overwhelm the resources, your capacities, and then the nervous system kind of stores that information through particular neural networks that have this illusionary effect of making it feel like it's happening in real time, in the present moment, versus an experience that happened in the past.
Yes.
So once somebody works, like effectively resolves a traumatic memory, then it has this quality of feeling a little more distant, more in the past, rather than our body minds are reliving it in the moment.
Yes, and perhaps being triggered by something that for most people, they wouldn't even notice that it having any impact, but because of this memory that's still very alive or activated in their system from the past, it's activating them in the now.
Yeah, so like kind of like how memories, like you're sitting in your car, a song comes on, and you're like, oh, I remember back then something happened, and you have this nostalgic moment, and there's these images and feelings and such, and so it's memories associative. So it's not like that implicit or that kind of collapsed memory, encapsulated memory is constantly happening. It's more of like if the associations kind of activate that file and then it comes up.
Right.
So for those of us who have sexual trauma history, then like even positive sexual experiences can activate that material and bring up uncomfortable, overwhelming feelings of helplessness and all our defense strategies that have tried to help us manage that energy.
Right, and the strategies came in to help protect us at the time, and at the time, they could have literally even been life-saving.
Definitely.
But they may no longer be serving us, yet we're trapped in that cycle of just running, kind of like, it's funny these days to say a stuck record, because I have a son and he doesn't even know what that is.
What's the record?
What is a record? What do you mean it's stuck? He's just streaming music. But yeah, just playing that same tape, but playing the same
programming.
The programming. There we go. I've got to update my language. Playing the programming, yes.
Yeah.
Over and over again. And I got really passionate about studying trauma as a trauma survivor myself. And I actually started looking at it through the lens of privilege, or even, I'm going to use the word disability, and I'm using that very broadly, but just because I realized I haven't had a choice but to go and really understand my own shadow, my own trauma, the things that crafted me into who I am today, because otherwise it would have just run my life and I wouldn't be half as functional as I am. So I've had to commit to therapy, and it's been great because it's given me a lot of emotional intelligence, and it's helped me get very in touch with my own body, which once again is really good for sex if we're doing that.
For sure.
Yeah. So I'm actually, like both of us, I think, are pretty geeky about learning about trauma, but I find once we've actually got tools and skills, then if a memory's coming up for ourselves, I'm getting better at helping to regulate myself if I have something come up. But especially for those of you that are practitioners, or if you're in a relationship with somebody who has trauma.
And if you're dating, you're going to encounter people with sexual trauma, just by sheer statistics.
Yes. So, for example, Peter Levine, who created somatic experiencing, which is one of the modalities that you use that I love. I'm a big fan of it. In one of his books, he said at least 70% of adults in the US have been affected by trauma. And when I took that to a different trauma specialist, she actually thought that those statistics were quite conservative.
I would agree.
And and 70%, that means almost everybody we're coming into contact with has been impacted by this. So that's part of why the title of our video is like the importance of being trauma informed, because you shared a kind of an icky but a very appropriate metaphor about what's happened since Me Too.
Yeah. It's kind of like the
Take
abscess.
a breath, everybody.
Abscess has been slayed and the ooze is spilling over. And so it's, how can we gently and effectively tend to that wound?
Yeah. Otherwise it can run your life and ruin your relationships.
Right.
And it's...
And I want to pause and just acknowledge, like you said, you didn't have a choice. Truth is, you did have a choice. You could have run away from your trauma. You could have like try to distance yourself in all sorts of different strategies, with addictions, with becoming a perpetrator, with like, there's so many different ways that the mind, our humanness can try and manage old wounds.
Right.
But you made an empowered choice to move towards it and become informed. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. It was a life enhancing choice.
Yes.
And not everybody makes that choice.
Well, some people, as part of their coping strategy, do just repress memories, but that can be part of what keeps them functioning and alive.
Totally.
You know, some of you may know I've been doing a lot of advocacy around sexual trauma recently, particularly in the neo-tantra world. And I've had a lot of survivors contacting me, sharing their stories, and some of them honestly haven't remembered. One woman contacted me, she hadn't remembered for 21 years. And just seeing a post, suddenly all the memories came flooding back.
Wow.
So, yeah. Good, thank you. Why doesn't everybody who's watching also take a breath? Let's all do that together. Yeah. And I love it what you're saying, Mark, thank you for tuning in, about wanting to know how to be sensitive and respectful of your partner's triggers, because that's a big part of why we're passionate about helping people, so you can feel more empowered instead of lost,
right?
Or adding to somebody else's. Oh, we're holding hands. You can't see that, but we're holding hands. Lovely. Co-regulation.
We're supporting each other and grounding and being present. And just feeling the warmth and connection and pleasure in this moment.
Oh, I'm just going to get my yoni going while we're talking about trauma. I just have weird fetishes. I can turn on my strange things like breath and trauma. But yeah, we do want to be sensitive. And I think, especially for men in the age of Me Too, I've just noticed with some of my students that there's some confusion, like, how do I be a supportive man? And perhaps we can talk initially a little bit about what it looks like what does trauma look like when it shows up for people? What are some of the signs so they could know somebody was even having a trauma reaction?
Well, Mark just used the word triggers. Right? So we can unpack that a bit more. It's like intense emotional experience, right? A certain lack of capacity to be witness to your emotions and be more at the effect of, and kind of be run by and
control. So like be in the washing machine of
like there's
emotions.
A certain flooding of our emotional experience, and it's harder to ground in the present moment and like see what's here.
So like be connected to the reality of what's actually
there's a
happening.
Certain distortion in our perceptual field of what's happening.
So like fear or anxiety could come up.
Right, and kind of disproportionate to the actual threat of a situation. I was just starting to listen to an audiobook about PTSD and sexual betrayal. Like just like a partner watching pornography, like triggering somebody to like intense levels of feeling abandoned, betrayed, violated, and that what's actually like threatening, one could say, is not a big physical threat in one's life, but one's reaction to it can be intense. And so it's kind of like all of those survival strategies from the prior experience get touched, and then the programming goes.
Right. So it like comes back online, and then you're in that moment, trapped in that moment in the past.
So shame, blame, emotional reactivity, a certain lack of capacity to like regulate and ground and be present.
I also
disassociation.
So I just want to, for those of you, PTSD is pretty well known, but we talk about
post-traumatic stress disorder.
Post-traumatic stress disorder, yes, is just when the trauma's actually got lodged much more deeply in the body, right? So it's actually something that's ongoing, because you can have a traumatic experience that doesn't even, like, you could be in a car accident,
right?
And for one person, I'll be like, oh well, call the insurance company, not a big deal.
So there was a resilience in that situation.
A resilience, yes.
Yeah.
And for other people, it would rock their whole world.
Right. So there's a certain level of hypervigilance of like, oh, am I going to be like hit on the left? So there's constantly looking to the left. Or like, any little thing that might have been connected to the initial trauma becomes a source of fear, or you might not even notice it. That's another thing that happens, especially in sexual trauma, is like,
you might not notice what?
We might not notice threats. So we're either like hyper-vigilantly noticing potential threats, or we're kind of oblivious to signs of.
And what does oblivious look like?
I'm recalling a study where women with sexual trauma, when approached at bars, were statistically more likely to kind of find themselves in an alleyway.
Oh, I see.
With a stranger.
Right. So to put themselves into more dangerous situations and not really realize.
Their instinct for who's safe and who's not safe, there's a miscalibration there.
Yes. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, because the barometer is kind of off.
Yeah. There's like our survival strategies for taking care of ourselves are they're hypervigilant, and so it's constantly looking for danger, or it gets shut off and it doesn't know how to look for danger.
Right. And so hypervigilance might be like scanning the room and like just checking, like, is there a way I can get out of here quickly? Or if a door slams and you like jump, and that probably doesn't happen every time for everybody, but if you notice you're more jumpy, your nervous system is probably jangling, which means you're paying some attention.
Terms of the emotional or like relational realm, so in the realms of intimacy, maybe you grew up you had a household where parent was prone to anger and violence associated with that anger. And then so any little hint of anger is like automatically brings up disassociation or a certain amount of reactivity.
Or even fear. Like you have a disagreement with a friend of yours, and it could be a minor thing, and then you get devastated that the whole relationship could be over, because that was like the environment that you may have grown up in. I want to make sure we pause and explain disassociation. And disassociation, people often think of it as leaving. And often as a child, you might have had that coping strategy, because if you were having such a traumatic experience that it didn't feel safe to stay present in your body, you might have found a way to literally energetically leave. And the person can look kind of vacant, or sometimes even their eyes glaze over a little. That energetically, to me, they look translucent. But what are the other signs that, how else would you explain to people?
Like the deer in headlights comes to mind. So there's a certain amount of like, if you ask them how they're feeling, it takes a while if they can find a response at all. So there's a certain lack of capacity to know what's happening in here. There is...
And maybe not even feeling parts of their body, right?
Like numb.
Yes, like you can't feel your feet. It's kind of too far down, or like this, right? Because it's not safe. And we never really want to force somebody to be back in the body. I like to invite people to come back. Yeah. And just, I think people will only return back. I love this. I'm getting all excited about this. But this is one of the things I love about you, and part of why we're choosing to do this, and for me to host classes for you, is because you share about trauma in such a juicy and embodied and vivacious way. And that's kind of how I live, and I really appreciate it, that it doesn't have to be this like total drudgery. No. You were sharing about how you work with your clients.
Yeah, I find my experience, like a lot of, when people think about trauma, there's also often this, or when I tell people that I'm a trauma resolution practitioner, they automatically assume that like the work I do is intense and heavy and challenging, and I'm stuck, and I'm just like working with people's crap. and that it must be heavy. But at least how I was trained, which is very much values pleasure, curiosity, going slow, taking on bits and pieces that you can be present for, finding your way towards pleasure in the midst of pain. I find my experience of working with trauma to be energizing and liberating and inspiring and enlivening and empowering, and I consistently walk away feeling more present and grateful to be alive.
It's beautiful.
Yeah,
I love what you said also about the slowing down, because even in today's video, which is like we're just like touching in on some of the highlights and giving you a few tools. Because I mean, trauma is a big subject.
It is a big subject.
Even some therapists are not trained.
Nope.
Even if they, in California, even if they are licensed marriage and family therapists, they might have no idea how to be with trauma.
Yeah.
And so slowing down. I notice when I'm working hands-on with somebody, if I watch them get activated, and especially if I track quite well for disassociation or hypervigilance. And if I see that happening, the first thing I do is I go to stillness. I just slow everything down. And so somebody was asking, what do you do if you're with a partner? That's one of the things I would do, is just to slow down.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And you and I have talked about grounding, and I know I teach a lot of grounding in my workshops, and I'm looking forward to seeing how you do it at the beginning of our upcoming workshop. But somatic experiencing is one of the practices you use, and I'd love you to share some simple techniques, because you talked about like people can't, if they disassociated, they can't connect to their body, or they can't feel.
Right.
And so what would be a way to help orient back to the body?
Yeah. So there's a simple exercise that you could practice with us right here, right now. It's kind of a combination of something called orienting and resourcing. So let your eyes wander around in your environment until you find something that's attractive, that's like calls your attention and feels kind of good to pay attention to. So right now I've got my eyes on a Himalayan salt lamp. Yeah. So once you find the something that's attractive, pleasant to look at, let your awareness be like really curious about it. Just kind of notice the details. And so for me, I'm noticing the way that there's light and warmth coming, like contained within a kind of a hardened structure that's got a lot of shapes and textures to it. And there's like a pink orange glow there. So I'm noticing details. And this is one of the pieces with trauma. Peter Levine said something to the effect of, a nervous system cannot run a trauma program while it's also running the programs of curiosity and pleasure. So right now, I'm being curious about this salt lamp. And I am focusing on what's pleasurable about it. Initially on the outside, but as I'm paying attention and getting more intimate with curiosity and focus on this beautiful, warm, glowing pink and orange salt lamp, I'm noticing in my own body, I get an impulse to smile. There's a warmth around my heart space. Like a relaxing around my shoulders. I feel my collarbones dropping down closer to the earth. I'm feeling a sweet pulsing sensation in my pelvis. Yeah, and then there's a nice natural impulse to breathe, right? So that's a little practice.
I love that. So to just run through the steps, I'm getting to hold her hand. So I'm getting to, we talked about co-regulation. So I'm getting to dial into what she's, it's so yummy.
And co-regulation basically means like her nervous system, her energetic body is kind of vibing off of mine and mine off of hers. And we're kind of getting into sync. And because we're both doing this thing of like tuning into what feels good and slowing down and getting deeper into our bodies and going into like a little more parasympathetic mode, we're supporting each other.
That's why cuddling's so good, right? Because somebody holds you. Well, I like being held. I hold my students.
It could be big spoon or little spoon.
Big spoon or little spoon. So the process that I watched Lorina doing was to allow her eyes, and you could say this to a partner. I've done it with my son. I do it with students. Like, let your eye just gently wander around the room and see what you notice, or get curious. What's there? And you ask them to look for something pleasant or pleasing, right?
Yeah, something that is attractive, catches their eye. Yeah.
Right. And then you, Lorina, you're so well practiced at this. This is why I want to break it down. But you invite them to, or you can even support them in connecting more deeply with that object, especially if they're struggling. So, you know, I loved it. I was feeling the glowing, like through you, but also through the lamp that's on the other side of the room. And so I might say, and for me, it also triggered a memory. Can I speak to that?
Yeah, please.
Because I bought this particular salt lamp in Sedona, and it was in this beautiful crystal shop. So it took me back. Can I say I resourced?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
do.
resourced back to a happier time. And, you know, I wasn't in a full-blown trauma response on the video, but the memories can be quite positive. So you start putting your attention on something that feels good and yummy to you, and then you're not thinking so frenetically about whatever that, we didn't say tape programming.
I call it, one of my phrases for this essential or resourcing is savoring the goodness.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. Just like little, taking time, slowing down, really allowing yourself to be impacted by what feels good. And it might start with something that's outside of yourself, but the more you take time with it, you'll find something within yourself that feels good. And then can you savor that? Can you savor that sweet pulse in your pelvis or that warm glow in your heart?
So to take what's outside and then bring it back to the body. If you were guiding somebody once they find resource from something pleasing, and I've dropped in with that, you could say, well, tell me what you're noticing in your body. Lorina's a pro, right? So she makes it look effortless.
And I'll tell you, I mean, I had my own trauma history, and 20 years ago, I remember like one of the first times somebody asked me, how are you feeling right now? I was a deer in headlights. Like I could tell you a bunch of stories, but I couldn't actually tell you what was going on in my body.
Yeah.
Now I could give like, a whole novel around what's going on in my body. But back in the day, there was a lot of disassociation. There was a lot of disconnect, and it's taken me time to learn how to feel what's going on in here and expand on that good feelings. Those good feelings. Yeah.
Well, I love it that you said that, because I'm pretty type A, so I like to be excellent at everything I do, including therapy. Like, I've got to be good. I've got to have a good session. Thanks for the thumbs up, you guys. I'm seeing that resonates for some of you as well. But I used to hate the question, what are you noticing in your body? Because even as somebody super sex positive, because of my own disassociation, I couldn't answer the question, and I could answer every other question. And what actually helped me was my neo-tantric experience, because I started listening a lot more carefully to the sensations and the energy moving in my body, and that helped actually inform my somatic experiencing, using the tools there, because suddenly I knew how to listen in a new way. So we're just offering you lots of different access points to finding your way back to the body, because there's so much wisdom.
Totally.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of pain stored in here too. So how resourcing, so savoring the goodness, helps you be more present to the pain. Because if the trauma was originally created by an imbalance of the level of stresses and an imbalance of level of resources, by increasing the amount of resource in your awareness, so there might be an abundance of resources around you, but if you're not actually connected to it,
right, you can't find them, even though they're right
find
there.
Them, they're right, like somebody is right there. I'm like, I love you, right? But if your nervous system can't really take that in, then you're gonna have a hard time feeling your resilience.
Right.
So much of the savoring the goodness practice is like practicing taking in, practicing feeling, practice rewiring those neural pathways so that they become more and more accessible. Those feelings of pleasure and goodness are more accessible and become like your default setting in life.
That explains so much of why you show up how you do in the world. Love it. I really do. It's beautiful how I watch you just, live it in a very embodied way.
Pleasure is a huge value of mine. And I've practiced it. I regularly bring attention to what's pleasurable. I regularly practice feeling it and slowing down with it and savoring.
I've got my hand on her knee, so that's where a lot of I'm still with you guys, but my attention is very present with her knee in this moment. But so first slowing down, if you're with somebody that goes into what they often call fight, flight, or freeze. And in the workshop that I'm hosting, Lorina, to offer to teach some of these skills, we're going to go into this in a lot more detail. This is just kind of the taste tester. So slow down, orient to something pleasurable, really immerse yourself in that, and then bring it home to the body.
Yeah, and then there's that phrase, what you appreciate appreciates. So once you bring it home into your body, like really focusing your attention on it, and as you focus your attention and appreciate it, it like grows and expands in your awareness, in your neural pathways, and it just becomes more accessible in your daily life. Yeah, and also know that like I want to kind of orient people to the reality that as they deepen into a pleasurable experience, what often happens is all like the old programming. I kind of have this image of a tree rooting, like as it gets deeper into the ground, as these pleasurable experiences get deeper into the ground, it typically will hit like a rock or like an area of stuckness. And then it starts, like, if you continue with the practice, it kind of starts to break it down. But more often than not, what happens is like we'll hit a certain amount of pleasure, and then maybe we'll start getting distracted, or maybe some grief will come up, or a memory will come up. And then so even you don't have to be in a stressful circumstance for trauma to come up. You might be in the heights of ecstasy in a sexual experience, or really enjoying a sunset. You know, like any sort of pleasurable experience can have a way of kind of like touching and bringing up the old programming that didn't have those resources, didn't have those pleasurable, positive experiences available back in the day.
Right. And I'm also wondering if there's a component of like feeling safe enough, right? That now, like I notice sometimes, and some of you may have had this experience where you have an orgasm, and after orgasm, suddenly there's a lot of emotion that comes up because you suddenly feel like open enough and safe enough, hopefully with that partner. And then these memories can come up. To be healed, to be released, for that energy literally to release from the body. I learned probably only in the last 6 months, but I've always known that trauma can be stored in the body, but it actually goes into the fascia. It's literally going that deep in.
Yeah, our whole bodies can organize around.
Right, and we may have no idea that that's even happening. And I know for many people get into Neo-Tantra, which is this focus on sacred sexuality, and they want to get high and they want to have better orgasms, and I love teaching and celebrating all of that. And sometimes when we start moving that much energy, it can dislodge memories or even just touching somewhere in the body that you didn't know, and the tears can come. This can often happen. I notice when people do G-spot work on a partner, that part of the second chakra, as we talk about it in a woo sense, their nerve ganglions down there. There we go. I'll get back to science. I've always got to sprinkle in some woo. But really, that can be an access point for a lot of trauma, especially for people with pussies in the body.
Yeah. So in the class, I'll talk about something I call the pleasure threshold. And it talks about, like, maps out what to expect as we help people, ourselves included, our partners included, increase their capacity to be with pleasure.
So to be able to handle more pleasure
without like
checking out
or going through this big disruptive swings. And actually, like, kind of like a classic big disruptive swing is somebody falling in love and then having all these fantasies and new relationship energy and it's all glorious, and then like 3 months later it's like all the insecurities and pains kind of come up to the surface. And like, so how can we increase our capacity to hold the charge of love in a more grounded, present moment way, and like carefully increase our capacity to be with all the resourced parts of ourselves at the same time. And then so it's more integrated, it's more grounded, it's less disruptive.
And then there's titration and pendulation.
Yeah,
for those trauma geeks amongst us.
So so we'll be talking about certain skills: titration, pendulation, resourcing, orienting. We'll be talking about these in the class. In addition to them being skills, they're also kind of like good assessments too.
Right. To see how you're doing versus the big
how you're doing and how somebody else is doing it too. Right?
Yes.
Like if you're dating, like we don't ask about each other's traumas in the beginning, and some people don't even know about their own traumas, but it's a little easier to like smell trauma once you're aware of these particular skills.
Yes.
And how somebody manages their energy. They might have had like really horrific traumatic experiences in their past, but they've done a certain amount of healing, and then so they're not carrying a big wound around of trauma in themselves.
Or it just didn't even land as trauma.
Right.
Like Trevor Noah. Do you know Trevor Noah?
Sounds familiar, but
he is the host of The Daily Show.
Oh yes, duh.
That's okay. I'm from South Africa originally, and he's a really successful South African in America. So
and
awesome and hot and like funny and all the things. Love it. But so I remember listening to the audio of his book, and he had what I would assume was quite a traumatic childhood growing up in apartheid South Africa. And in one of his stories, he talked about his mum needing to keep him safe in a minivan he was in. And I can't remember safe from what, but she threw him out of the moving vehicle to save him. And he talks about it like it's nothing. And he didn't map that. He was like, oh yeah, my mom's taking care of me. I love my mom. She's doing what's best for me. I mean, I wish I was as good as he is.
Well, that's a lot of resilience.
That's a lot of resilience.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And basically, trauma skills support people in developing their resilience.
And their resilience is like the way they're able to surf the waves of
life. Like
bounce back from something. Yes.
Yeah. Take a stress and meet the challenge versus being overwhelmed by it.
Right, because life, especially if you live in the Bay Area, I know there's some Bay Area people, it's stressful. Even just driving through rush hour can be stressful. Yeah.
There's no end of like stress inducing experiences available.
Right. Well, anyway, really in modern day life.
Modern day living, yeah.
So I want to just go and see some of the questions in the comments. And if you have a question, you're welcome to pop it on the chat message, and or write a comment, and we'll do our best to get to it. Cindy, are you really tuning in from Turkey? That's amazing. Awesome. Amazing. So, yes, so Lorraine is just mentioning that she was appalled to learn that in the late 90s there was no trauma training for Neo-Tantra teachers. And it's actually a big part of why I created my own school and why I've brought Lorina in, because all of us need to have more skills around this, because it, as we've seen from Me Too, it is rampant. It is everywhere. Right? Yeah. And this is not to like freak you out. We just want you to be empowered so that you know what to do, or know when something is beyond, we haven't even talked about that, but beyond your skill level. Right. So for example, even though I work professionally with trauma survivors, I have a number of therapists that do somatic experiencing like you do, or offer something called EMDR, and they are specialists at being able to go in with things that are too advanced for me. So I may work, like that. I didn't become a therapist because then I couldn't touch the bodies as much as I like to.
Touching people too.
Yeah, touching is good. But so we can work as a team, and they can, if somebody's so disassociated that they can't be present in their body, I can't do Neo-Tantra with them to me that actually feels like a consent violation. So I'm very passionate about the neo-tantra world being more informed, but you really titled this skills for savvy sexperts. And to me, sexperts is professionals, doing hands-on pleasurable work.
Facilitators, sex and intimacy coaches, sex educators. So it's important that they are trauma informed so that they can be more responsive and capable of holding the energy when it inevitably will show up, or craft their exercises or their interventions in a way that's more trauma sensitive, and so they're not inadvertently activating something and not knowing how to hold it when it comes up. But also, like, we're humans and we're sexual beings and we're relating all the time, and then so we're gonna bump into it in some way or another, and then so to be more conscious around the various options one has to relate to it in a way that supports empowerment rather than reactivates trauma and reinforces a sense of helplessness, or boundary violation, or all the things that reinforce the story or the experience of not being safe.
Right. So we want to create lots of pleasurable environments for you, whether you're with pros like us or you're having a fun night at the dungeon. One of my particular favorites anyway. But where if somebody goes into a trigger or a trauma response, that you have some tools and know what to do and know when to say to them, oh, we need to find a trauma specialist for you to work with. So this is what I love about the word sexperts, because for me it's actually quite inclusive. It's like if you're sex positive, maybe you're poly or you're kinky or you just like having lots of sex or whatever it is, or you're committed to your pleasure and other people's, this class is for you. So I'm going to be a student in the class, so that even though I know a lot about this stuff, there's always more that you can learn. And I love, Lorraine, that you touched on the fact that, yes, we need much more consent, and it often, even basic grounding skills aren't taught effectively enough or stressed enough, even in teacher trainings, which is a huge missing, because you do tend to rev the nervous system when you move that life force energy.
For sure.
And if at the very least, if you know how to ground, you've got somewhere to discharge and dump some of that. And then, Rocky, early on you said, do you help men such as myself that have sexual trauma? I work with people of all genders that have sexual trauma. So yes, you could get in touch with either of us, Rocky, and I'm actually not sure where you live, but we're both based in the San Francisco Bay area.
Yeah, and I'm also available via video call. I do a 30-minute free complimentary consultation just to get a feel for what each person, if it's a good fit. So so I want to just tune in to the degree of trauma somebody's holding. It might be more important to have in-person work, depending on the degree in which how many resources they might have. And so I do work with people with sexual trauma, and I like to feel it out.
Right. And we might refer out if it's beyond what we can do, or find somebody, help you find somebody in your area. Thank you for safe porting him, Cindy. I'm watching you, catching while we were talking away. So this question actually comes up a lot, is people ask, oh, I'm not in the Bay Area, so what do I do? How do I find somebody? And my recommendation would be to look for, literally Google is your friend, and I would look for somatic experiencing practitioners. Isn't there a directory?
Yeah, on the somatic experiencing main website, there is a practitioner directory there.
Right.
And so it offers local.
Yes, you can find them anywhere in the country, and probably, Peter Levine teaches all over the world.
Yes.
And then EMDR is something else that I've found quite amazing. People that are offering those, you don't have to be a marriage and family therapist to do somatic experiencing. Like, I even incorporate some orientation at the beginning of my sessions and at the end. But to do EMDR, and I always forget what the acronym stands for, but they basically help you move between the left and right sides of the brain with, it sounds kind of kooky, with like sounds and pulsing or lights, but it's amazing how it just resources you. It
can be really effective.
Yes, I mean, they used it, they've used it on Vietnam vets, so the Veteran Association even recommends it. So those are two things you can Google wherever you are in the world to find a list of practitioners. So, oh, Cindy, I'm loving all your support. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. And Mark, thank you again for just saying you wanting to be sensitive and respectful. And I think a key thing is just learning to slow down. And if somebody is having a trigger, you know, just give them the spaciousness and ask them what they need if they're able to tell you. But, you know, it's probably not the best time to keep revving to try and get to that place of expanding the pleasure potential or reaching for orgasm. Like, you want to bring the nervous system down. You might want to hold the hand or something, because we're co-regulating here. Just I'm having so much fun with that. Just simple things, right? We just came into sync much more, just even from holding hands or holding the person.
And for some people, they might need space. Like, touch might be too intense, but like maintaining a certain level of curiosity is helpful if somebody's having a trigger. And also staying present in your own body.
Yes. And opening, this is another big thing. Often when we have our eyes closed, everything, the imagining or the story, that the programming that's coming back, that's playing so loudly that we forget what's actually happening.
Right.
So get the person to open their eyes. You can be like, notice the four walls. Notice that you're safe here. Notice, say I'm sitting on a chair, like the chair. So that they can actually come more present into the room. I notice things can get very accentuated or amplified if the eyes stay closed.
Right, you're kind of like in that little loop. And one of the natures of trauma is that that loop is going and you're disconnected from the present moment. So keeping your eyes open and noticing what's here now helps you get out of that past loop and into the room.
I'm just checking. Oh, we've even got, hi, Neil. Neil tuned in from Australia, and he's loving the interaction. We'll have to do some more of these.
Yes, please.
Oh, and Mark's raving about somatica.
Awesome.
That's wonderful. We're going to go more into freeze response in the class itself. And we've actually put the link at the top of this video for you if you want to join in the fun, because I really want to stress, like, watching one little hour-long Facebook Live with us dropping like a couple of hints.
Little tasters.
Yeah, that's really all it is. And trauma can really kind of seep through into people's lives. So it's part of why I'm passionate, and I know you are too, about people being more trauma informed. So you actually, to go and at the very least come and do an evening class or one of the day longs that Lorina is going to offer too, because there actually is quite a lot to learn, like the physiology, and like you've got to sort of understand the process, because it can look almost quite irrational sometimes when somebody's in a response. I'm thinking of a couple that I work with, and she doesn't have trauma and he does. And she's like, but why don't you trust me?
Yeah.
And I can just see in his eyes, it's like, she's amazing. She's not going anywhere. And it's not his fault, but that programming's running
it helps you
again.
Develop more compassion and acceptance, and helps you like understand how somebody is organized in their mind and in their bodies, and so you can hold them more effectively and like be present with them more effectively and not take it on too much.
If somebody is in a freeze response, though, doing what dialectic behavioral therapy says, like opposite action, like getting them up and walking, would you recommend something like that to counteract freeze, or what would you? What would you say for freeze?
I've worked with both. I've held people like, oh, kind of like, and in that free space, we'll explore what is available and just kind of let them be in it and let it thaw. And sometimes,
oh, I love that.
And then sometimes we'll find the anger underneath the freeze. When I hear of anger underneath freeze, I get all sorts of excited, and like help them access it in a way and move with it in a that's like helps them feel their own potency and a sense of empowerment and pleasure in that. So I don't have a rote way of dealing with freeze response, but I do want to acknowledge, Mark, like that is a challenge. Like we're talking about Me Too, we're talking about not just professional setting, but dating, like somebody saying one thing and they're freezing. And then so like they're not really naming, like they're not taking care of their boundaries very effectively. And so it's important to be able to learn how to read body language, subtle cues, attune on a more subtle level. And the more trauma-informed you are, the more you can track those subtleties. If somebody's in a still place or in a frozen place, they can look quite similar. But if you're more informed, you can differentiate and know how to respond more effectively.
Right, literally even practitioners can notice the dilation of the pupils, like to that level. That blew me away one day when my therapist mentioned there. I thought I was so aware, and meanwhile back at the ranch I had no idea, but she was tracking everything. But I referenced the moving because I remember one day she literally said to me, and I was, stuck in a store, we're going to walk in the session. And like we walked around the block and I did not want to walk. I was my heels on. I'm like, I don't want to walk. And she kind of made me, she'd been very patient, but she made me walk and I felt so much better.
Awesome.
And then I was able to talk about things. So anyway, I know on that day, that particular strategy worked great for me. So where can people find you, given that we know you have all these amazing skills?
Yeah.
Where can they, what's your website, for example?
LorinaManzanita.com.
So we've got the spelling of Lorina on this message, and we'll probably, there comes the love and the hearts. Thank you. But yeah, we'll pop Lorina's website in there as well, and then you can see all the different ways she works with people. And you can find me, I'm on Facebook a lot. My little green light is almost always on. I just love this medium as a way to connect with so many people around the world. But you can also check out my website, which is carolinecarrington.com. And feel free to sign up for my newsletters because I end up sharing free tips and tools and videos, as well as discounted tickets to yummy events like the one Lorina is coming in to do. And I feel really blessed to meet somebody as embodied as you. And I love your nervous system. I tend to gravitate towards people who are really, I would say, down-regulated, but like calm. Because I tend to be like, ooh, high energy, which is great.
It's fun to have range.
When I go into teacher archetype, I drop in nice and slow. But the rest of the time, I'm like, my nickname, was Duracell. Anyway, yeah, I feel like I'm trying to cram in 5 lives into one lifetime sometimes. But I'm very grateful that all of you tuned in. Thank you for your questions. Feel free to share this in your communities. So if it's a resource for people, we just want people to be more supported, whether we're doing it or other people are.
I'm just imagining what it'd be like if people were more supportive. And it just feels good. More trust and connection and intimacy. Honoring each other's power and yeses and nos, and attuned to what really feels good versus overriding their body's intelligence. And it just feels like a yummy world I want to live in. So.
Oh, I
please.
love that picture she just painted. I don't know if you can feel that through the screen. But... So yes, we did find ways to make today super hot, even while talking about trauma. So thanks so much for joining us, and we look forward to more very soon.
Yes, please.
Bye.